All right, Sax Geeks, thought we'd do a little series on mouthpiece refacing. Now, I've had a bunch of mouthpieces refaced. I used to not believe in it, but then over time met some people that were doing good work, and that's what you really need. You need to find someone who's a craftsman that really put a lot of time into working on mouthpieces, because that's what it takes. It takes just as much time, if not more, to learn what makes a mouthpiece tick, what makes them play well, what different types of players like, and how to do the fine finish. It's very fine, detailed work. I have years ago bought some mouthpiece refacing items, supplies, sandpaper, a little measuring glass, some feeler gauges, and it's just so much work, for me playing the instruments more where it's at. So I never got into refacing in any way. But I've learned a lot about it over the years from working with mouthpiece techs and kind of gathering what they do. And then also recently someone gave me a bag of sort of worthless mouthpieces, so I set up a little space here on my workbench, and I can't really do this kind of work. It's a lot of numbers, math. Seriously, it's hard stuff. But I thought I'd show you. So some people don't really know what it is that goes into it and why it's so much work. Why it's so expensive and why it takes so long. So I thought I'd show you a little bit about what I've learned about what a mouthpiece refacer does and why I don't do it. Why most of us don't do it. It's a very specific thing. And if you know someone who's a good mouthpiece refacer, you buy them a bottle of wine every time you see them, because Jesus, man, that's a whole nother thing. So let's take a look what we got here. And truthfully, if you already know how mouthpieces and mouthpiece refacing works, don't watch any of this, the next part either. It'll be stuff you already know. I don't know anything anybody else doesn't know. There's no secrets here, really. I hope. We'll find out. Here you're going to see some of the tools that a refacer would use. Obviously, mouthpieces to reface. That you've got, sorry about that, you've got a glass that's gauged, is metered on it. This is plastic, is cheap, but the guys that do this legitimately use a glass one. And then feeler gauges, which are these. These usually come in a big Swiss Army knife type deal, and then you have to free them from the thing. And I just have a set of 5 of them at different sizes. Obviously, if you were doing this seriously, you'd have all of them for all your various measurements, and we'll talk about that in a minute. You'll also see some small, tiny little files. These are referred to as needle files. And you'd also probably have a whole collection of these, and they get dull and you have to buy more. And this is a measuring, I guess, wand, and it's graduated as well. You might not be able to see that. And these are usually measuring in millimeters, and I'll show you what we do with that. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to change the facing of a mouthpiece. When you're having someone work on a mouthpiece for you, they could be fixing a whole number of things. This one is a terrible mess, and we'll talk about that in a second. So you have a table, the flat part of your mouthpiece, and then you have your facing curve, which leads to the tip, and that's your mouthpiece. Now, this should be flat, and then where the curve begins is called the back number. What that means is when you take a mouthpiece and you put the gauge on, the thinnest feeler gauge, the very floppy one, will go in and stop. And where it stops is your back number. And when you're doing it, it needs to be even. You don't want it to be off, right? It's got to be even. So that's the back number, and that indicates where the facing starts. Here. That's the first thing. Your tip opening, which gives you your tip, is measured at the end. This is your back number, as we said before, where it goes flat. And then here, along the curve, are going to be your other measurements. People do 6 or 5, I guess 5. And you're just trying to get an idea of how gradual or complex the curve, gradual or abrupt the curve is. Some mouthpieces have a short curve. Some have a more gradual curve. And this is one of the things we're looking at. This greatly affects the response of a mouthpiece. While working on the facing work and getting all the stuff ready, the mouthpiece refacer will pay attention to the back side of the mouthpiece. The window, which is this part down here, making sure that it's wide enough and round enough. And then the side rails, which need to be even and fairly thin for some good response. And then once they get the facing where they like it, then they start doing some work on that as well. One of the reasons that you have to address the thickness of the rails and the window is because as you remove material from the mouthpiece, all these surfaces get thicker. So you've got to refinish everything once you've got it closed. As you can see, this is really poor right here. That would not play at all. So you would have to then fix that. So we'll take a quick look at this Brillhart 3, which was one of the junk mouthpiece given to me. It's pretty much how it came to me. I've done a little resurfacing, and we take a look. And at first, there was no flat spot. This did not catch anywhere. So it was really bad. Let's see if we have something now. See, now it's kind of gross. That's not really stopping anywhere good. So that's what they have to deal with, is every time you make a swipe, something changes and you're trying to figure out what to do and how to do it. Well, how do they know that? Well, they know it because they've worked on it for years and years and years to get any good at this at all. So this is why it's expensive and it takes a long time. This is the amount of work goes into this. It's amazing. Refacing. What else can we talk about? We got some sandpaper here. 320 grit comes in lower grit and finer grit. You know, more rough and more fine. This is about middle, and this is what you'll use to remove a lot of material. To make the mouthpiece the shape that you want here in the facing, so that you can then finish it off and get the finish work done. So what we're going to do is we're going to measure it with the tip wand, and for a tenor mouthpiece, I just pulled this up. So if I wanted this to be at 105, which is a 7-star, which a lot of people like a 7-star, the measuring on the wand has to be 270, which on this one is all the way up at the end here. And so we put this in between the glass and the tip of the mouthpiece, and we gently drop it in and see where it stops, and it'll show you. And this is only at 190 or so, which is quite shy of our tip opening. If I put that number in, that's only 74, which would be a very small mouthpiece. So this isn't where you want it. So how do you get it to where you want it? What they do is we're going to take our mouthpiece, and I'm going to use some finer grit sandpaper here, more coarse rather, because that's a lot of material to remove. And then we're going to take it and we're going to swipe and draw back this way so that we can make the curve as we want it. We'll see how we do. And we're, removing material. I'm gonna wipe this. You want to kind of clean as you go so you get clear readings. That's one thing, I would think. I never studied this with anybody. Most refacers, rightly so, closely guard their secrets and things. So now I'm going to measure it again, see if we made any forward movement. So that moved up a little bit. As you can see, it didn't move very far. That's still showing 190, maybe 193, so it didn't move much, and that was a couple of swipes on the pretty rough sandpaper. So as you can see, it's got a lot of room to go. And then what happens is you pull up here, and as this gets thinner and thinner at the tip, the refacer then has to reshape all of that. You'll find also that they have to move the window back as the mouthpiece gets shorter through this process. They then have to move the window back again, so that the reed responds the way it's supposed to. So the amount of work that goes into refacing a mouthpiece is insurmountable. It's incredible. And it takes years to learn how to do it. I don't think I would embark on it. My eyes are a little screwed up, and it's hard to keep track of all the numbers for me. It's a very detail-oriented thing. So that's the reality. So it's a cool process. I'm going to keep messing with these mouthpieces, and if one of them comes out playable, I'll let you know. I was working on this little Koof mouthpiece before, and this one is a little more presentable, and I tried to even out the tip rail and make it a little bit thin, because I think a thinner tip rail tends to respond a little nicer. Have not tried this yet, but I think it's around a 6 star. It's an alto piece, so the opening is going to be a little different. Let's measure it. Okay, that's at about 210. Let's see what 210 measures. Come on, buddy. 21. So that measures 82. That's actually about a 7. So it's pretty open, but there's no telling how it's going to play because a lot of it is related to the facing curve. So this is where all the years of expertise come in. Somebody like me, I'm not just going to swipe the mouthpiece and expect it to be playable, but it's an interesting experiment to do. And you would never do this to a mouthpiece that's important to you. I don't even suggest, giving your primary mouthpiece to a refacer. The best way to handle that kind of thing is to find another mouthpiece and work with a refacer to build a mouthpiece that you'll love. But I've heard more stories of people, getting mouthpieces kind of ruined, or at least changed so much that they couldn't play it. That's all relative. It's a long conversation. Let me know what you think. Was this a waste of time? Do you already know all this stuff? What do you think? Let me know. Trying to see what kind of videos might be interesting to you. And like I said, if either of these are playable, I'll do a video on it. So there you go. All right, so this is the Brillhart tenor one, and I've been pulling it. Then this is the lighter sandpaper. Just pulled that up, and I started running out of room here at the tip. It hasn't moved very much, so this is one of the things that I think you deal with, is trying to figure out how to handle all this stuff. Now, most people that work on mouthpieces will tell you a bunch of things, one of which is that, you want to bring your tip out this way, that you don't want to pull from the table to make the mouthpiece go like that. You don't want to take material off this way. But that's what I did. I started pulling more from the heel to get the mouthpiece to go like this. I don't know, you can't see, but to get the mouthpiece to go like this a little more so that there's more distance at the tip. And it did. I mean, it got me, it was very uneven at first. And it got me, no, that's not a good measurement. Let's do this right. And it got me up to around 255, which is better for tenor. And then what you do is you start working with the finer materials, and then what I did in the middle was I did work on the tip a little bit with the flat file, just to get me a little room here to see what was going on with the tip. And once you get the measurements you like, and if everything looks good, that's when you start working your baffle in order to thin out the tip rail, and then you're going to have to work on the tip itself, and this should be somewhat flat on the end here. It shouldn't be thin, really thin. Sometimes it ends up that way. I've had mouthpieces refaced that are pretty thin up here at the tip, but the piece plays good, so it is what it is. It's a different style. So that's kind of how you do that, and then hours and hours of work and years and years and years and years of experience doing it. It's a lot to deal with. So I'm going to keep messing with this a little bit, see if I can get it to even out with the whatever. Again, I have no idea what I'm doing, so I don't suggest you do it either, but I just thought you'd like to know a little bit about how this works and what the job is. It's interesting. I find it fascinating, but I wouldn't want to dedicate, I'd rather play the horn, than spend all this time working on mouthpieces. And then, let's talk about one other thing. And then there's the whole business, the whole commerce thing. I mean, I couldn't imagine getting good enough at mouthpiece refacing to the point where I would trust myself to work on someone else's valued mouthpiece. This is just an old junk Brillhart. Doesn't matter. But somebody brings you a slant or something, really dear. You know, I don't know. I couldn't imagine getting to that point where you could work for other people on their mouthpieces. So that's a big thing. That's why you're trusting somebody with something. That it's a lot of work to get there. The people that do mouthpiece refacing, route mouthpiece work, design and build their own mouthpieces. God bless them, because man, it's intense. So that's a couple of my thoughts on refacing. I find it interesting. It was not something I would do personally myself. And the numbers, we didn't even talk about the numbers, the facing curve itself. That's a whole other thing, and I'm not that good with numbers. So that being said, I don't think I'd be a mouthpiece refacer. I don't know many people that would. It's so detail oriented. It's incredible. It's interesting. So like I said, if you know somebody who refaces mouthpieces and you like their work, buy them a bottle of wine, something. I don't know. Do something for them. And get your next mouthpiece refaced while you're at it. So there you go. This has been Saxophone Geek, Mouthpiece Mania. I don't know. Did you enjoy this? Did you learn anything? Did you already know all of this? Let me know what you think. And Saxophone Geek, thanks for watching. Thanks for watching Saxophone Geek.